Hello, folks. It's Roger from There Be Giants, and welcome to another episode of Giant Talk. I'm really excited today because we like to bring sort of slightly alternative perspectives to the world of objectives and key results and everything that kind of wraps around them. And as you know, we're big fans of making sure that you have the right type of culture that underpins OKRs. So today we're going to bring you that sort of cultural perspective from the view of a military service, and that military service is the British Royal Air Force. And I'm really pleased to have our guest join us from the Air Force today. We have Nic Corrigan. So welcome, Nic.
Hi, Roger. Good to meet you.
You too. So let's start off by kind of getting to know you a bit, where you fit in, what you do, if you would, please.
So my name's Nic Corrigan. I'm a flight lieutenant in the Royal Air Force. Of our 17 professions in the Royal Air Force, I work in the military training specialist profession. So we are probably one of the smaller cohorts, including our non-commissioned, which is our physical training instructors. There's about 680 of us, some people that are full-time, regular military personnel like myself, and then some who are reservists as well.
Right. So your area of the Air Force is responsible for doing the training, the development, and I guess, as you've mentioned, that goes from physical all the way up to flying fighter jets, doesn't it?
Yeah. So our workforce is deployed as we do some delivery, but we are generally there in more of, I suppose, a learning and development, assurance, governance, design perspective, both in the synthetic environment, in the physical environment, psychological environment, human performance world, and also the planning environment. So we plan and deliver training and execute it in line with the force's intent. So the Royal Air Force is broken into different forces. So currently I'm based as part of global enablement, and I specifically work in the engineering and logistics force at Royal Air Force Wittering.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you for that. So the reason why I was curious to get you on Giant Talk was, as I mentioned a moment ago, the culture that underpins OKRs has a huge impact on whether they actually, deliver any value for the organization. They can be just a tool for command and control, or they can be a genuine tool for, empowerment, growth mindset, continuous learning. So, and you mentioned that part of your brief is around human performance. So just expand on that and perhaps how that then kind of underpins the culture that you guys have built and want to continue to reinforce.
So we're 27,000 strong in the Royal Air Force, and our biggest asset on our profit and loss is obviously the monthly payroll. So our human performance element is we have physical things that we have to endure. Our pilot workforce will have to endure, G tolerance, that type of stuff. Our dismounted close combat, so the Royal Air Force Regiment will have to soldier in respect to that output, as we all will as within our force protection responsibilities. So the broad principles of human performance in the project that I worked there were about moving, eating, thinking and sleeping better, rather than as just, being probably a little bit over stoic, a bit toxically stoic in respect of just kind of grizzing it out, and we'll hope that, that we're not going to do that, or we'll hope that a human error won't happen. So our human factor training, which is an annual mandated matter for us around that kind of engineering bit of things that can go wrong, and that came out of the report from Charles Haddon Cave after the Nimrod disaster, is really important. So the human performance of how do we both effectively deliver the set requirement in training to enable the Royal Air Force to fight and fly and win. Okay.
And what do you do? So that kind of sets the scene or sets out the standards for those that participate in, the training and all the activities that come as a result of that. But that's only the start, isn't it? Where developing and reinforcing a culture is concerned. What do you do to kind of make sure that people have got the message and continue to reflect the values and the behaviors that you expect them to show as members of the force?
So I think there's there's different mechanisms. So there's one, there's our PME, our professional military education. So everybody at every rank has some form of professional military education in respect of their air and space power knowledge. Agnostically, we all have to keep our human factors, diversity, quality diversity training, our physical fitness, our oral hygiene, and our physical health into, regular annual checkups. So there's the driving license, which is the stuff that you need to do, the competencies.
Yeah.
And that's everything that I've just outlined, including information management, passports, that type of stuff, which is really important for safe and secure systems, probably in our world more than ever before. And then the other side is then probably how you learn to drive, which is your professional military education. So for me, as a junior officer, as a flight lieutenant, I complete 4 weeks professional military education during my flight lieutenancy, which should be around a 6-year to 7-year period before I promote. And then if I'm selected for promotion, I'll then do a further 8 weeks. So that professional military education focuses on air and space power leadership, command leadership and management. And then equally for our colleagues in the non-commissioned pathway, as they ascend through the various ranks, they'll do bite-sized courses from anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks to support that command leadership management.
Right. Okay. So there's a huge amount of training, and I love the distinction you make between sort of getting your driving license and then learning how to drive.
Yeah.
That positions it really nicely. Is there anything that happens on an ongoing basis, framework standards that people work within to like I say, can continue from one training event to the next? They are, they're not forgetting it. It's not drifting away. It's not falling outside.
Yes, I think that's probably our profession's role. Is we're the oil in that machine that supports that continuous growth, that continuous improvement. So the requirement setting will change inevitably because the defence landscape, the defence reviews, the world changes. So what is it that our people need to be equipped to deal with versus then also the delivery of that and how those courses are designed is a matter. And that's what the defence systems approach to training looks after. So what's the requirement is the first question. I think the bit that then comes with that is within the day-to-day level of an employee, for want of a better phrase, coming in, or a service person in our world coming in, is what are they doing to advance themselves to grow, and then in their annual objective setting. So I think we have a really useful reporting system around our objectives.
Right.
There's only, we have a mandated objective, which is really important for us, which is equality, diversity and inclusion. And everybody has that and we're held to account on that. I think that's a really powerful bit for us. And then the 7 other objectives, you agree with your first reporting officer and your second reporting officer, which generates that output. But because that's going to link into their command plan, going to link into how we fit or shape within the force, irrespective of what role you're doing and what rank you are. So those, for me, those objectives drive your requirement, drive your personal growth, and then will also then give you the opportunity to advance and to say, so in my case at the minute, I'm driving hard for promotion. So I'm trying to demonstrate project work or the ability as squadron leader that I can operate at that level in one of my 8 objectives. And so I can deliver something. So that might be something social. That might be something in front line. That might be, a particular piece of work or staff work for the commander that I work for. Or that might be something that tests that individual. So I think that's really beneficial. We can scale up or scale down dependent upon the individual's place at that moment in time in their situation.
Okay. And so I'm starting to get a picture that you obviously have, a performance framework, perhaps, as you might describe it for individuals. What about teams, though? Where do teams focus in this performance framework, so to speak?
Yeah, so John Adair's model, team, task, and individual, pretty prevalent across the military, very much, kind of leadership 101. How do you balance team, task, and individual? Because bluntly, you can't put 33% into those 3 things and try and balance them. There's going to be different times when we need to focus on the team, that whatever formation that might be at group level, in my case, at support force level or at wing level or at squadron level or even at flight level, and then everything down from there. So where does teams focus is one is our values, respect, integrity, service and excellence, which is AP1 within so Air Publication 1, ethos, calls, values and standards of the Royal Air Force. The other bit as well is what are we trying to do and why? So if I take the the combat estimate, which is a 7-question process for land, which predominantly the army would use, but we're trained in it. What is the situation and how does it affect me? That's the first question you taught. I changed it to what's the situation, how does it affect us? Because from that team perspective, how is the team going to get to achieve what we need to achieve in a command? And to think of command as a downward process is relatively myopic for me. Commanders across all levels. Our greatest rank is our corporal. That's the first formal leadership position in our hierarchy structure. Why aren't we making great corporals? Make great corporals, the rest will look after itself.
So that's basically that's junior to middle management, isn't it?
So to a degree, I mean, probably, as a flight lieutenant, I spend more time dealing with corporals than or sergeants than deal with potentially flight sergeants, warrant officers. But that's because of the position that I suppose I hold within my daily terms of reference. The big bit from there is to really hone in on that team point of view is, and the San Antonio Spurs and sport made this point. So many teams rather, focus on the individual. Well, let's focus on the team. Let the team look after itself with accommodating time to grow, accommodating time to think, accommodating people, but not at the sacrifice of what the mission in our world requires us to do. So we've got to balance that, and that's the commander's responsibility. And I call that greenhouse management. You've got the greenhouse, you've got the sun coming through. There's going to be a point when you need to put the water on. There's going to be a point when you need to open the vents and let some air in, and you might even need to let the door open. But what you got to do is make sure that door is tethered down so it doesn't smash when the wind gets too much. That's for me, and that's the craft. And we talk about craft a lot from a coaching and management expertise. Now, I have a background in professional sport before I joined the military. The craft of coaching. So for me, it's not the what, it's the so what. So what are we going to do about this? And if we ask in the implied plural, we'll normally get to a solution which everybody can understand and collaborate on further. And I think that's a really powerful term. And we're now in a place where our training and our training objectives at squadron level, we're now talking about things in the Royal Air Force like interoperability. Well, if you do that, I can do this. So this collective training bit. Yeah. For me, Roger, that's where the gold is. Collaboration, difference of thought, collective training. That's the attitude and approach for me.
Yeah. And well, you just nailed it, because I was just about to say I'm hearing that there is increasing collaboration there, which when we take OKRs into clients is often one of the primary goals that they want to see, because traditionally they've got a lot of siloed activity, usually by function, that's going on, and they're not talking to each other, and they need to get that cross-functional collaboration going. So that's where we kind of have to break the traditional view of teams, which is teams within functions, to genuine teams that are focused around a particular priority, a particular goal, which actually means, you need to pull in support contributors from multiple areas of the organization, because very rarely does a priority fit nicely and neatly into one little area of the organization. Certainly not a big one anyway. It's not a big priority. Okay. So you use one of my favorite questions there, one of my favorite acid tests, which is the so what. And when we're helping clients to develop powerful key results, typically they default, first of all, to defining an action. And then when they present us with that as their key result, we say, okay, but so what? So what if you do that? So what if you deliver that? So what if you enable that? What's it going to give you? What's your true measure of impact, of success? Where's your evidence? Do you find yourself kind of putting those challenges to teams when they're trying to define what success looks like?
I think for me, that's probably our biggest tension to manage is, what are we asking them to do? What are our technical experts, particularly in the engineering workforce, who are massively, 1, well-trained, 2, passionate, and 3, talented? And that's in no order. Of around where can we push them? What does that mean for us to deliver our air and space power for UK defence? How does that fit in the puzzle that we live in? So when you're asking a team to do something, it's about challenging creatively and getting them to collaborate effectively. So we have to be as junior commanders and as all commanders in my head. We have to be compassionately ruthless about what we're asking people to do. And we need to do that with respect for them and their environment. And we have to do that with the excellence that I believe that we are known as the Royal Air Force for. You know, we are the first independent air force in the world. 1918, stood up by Royal Commission for 4 years. 106 years later, we're still here as an independent. We're the first independent air force. And even if you look at the United States Air Force, that wasn't formed until after the Second World War. From that perspective, and that's different. That's just a different story. So that's so what point is, so what does this mean? What does this mean for where we're going? What does this mean for the context of potentially the battle that's changed or the operational picture that's changed? What does it mean for the political, military, economic, strategic, social and infrastructure? So that PMESI acronym, PME SSI, is something as a junior commander, that's our railroad, handrail, so that we don't become so obsessed with the mission objective. If you focus on the main effort, which is the thing that you need to do to achieve that mission, it'll look after itself. So the best way I can kind of probably pictorialize that is if you're climbing through a sky ladder and you need to pop you're in a fire, there's a building, you climb up that ladder and you need to pop the hatch to get up onto the top to be rescued. Well, you've got to pop the hatch, haven't you? So you need to climb up the ladder. And you've got to get up the stairs to get to the ladder. So that's your process, right?
Yeah. So
focus on that process, focus on that refinement, make sure that safety is never compromised. I was recently on exercise in Suffolk where the heat is really hot this time of year. Brilliant, great learning opportunity. But what are the safety measures that are put in place that both policy demands of me and equally ethically I can put people through? So if somebody says, you can only exercise and you can only conduct that exercise where, the magic number on the thing is, the magic number on the temperature gauge is 3.0, do I run people at 2.9 for longer? Or do I actually use the rest and work rate table to say we've achieved the task, let's get them into recovery? And that's probably the bit of the so what is within the tactical aid memoir and the land environment for the Army. And obviously we cross-pollinate quite a lot. Recuperation of your personnel is a legal requirement of a flight, platoon, or divisional commander in the military. So put that into the work setting, into the day-to-day business world.
Yeah.
Recuperation and the so what of people should not be forgotten. Because if you look after that bit, which comes back to our human performance element, that links back to your ladder going through that building analogy. A fresh, revitalized, reorganized, cohered person is going to perform for you.
No, I think that's a really powerful frame there. It's not just asking the so what question, but asking it from a number of different perspectives. Where you've been, where you're going. So what does it mean for our people? There's some really, really powerful frames in that, which I think are excellent takeaways. Because one of the things that and just to connect it back to the objective part of OKRs, is that a very poorly defined objective is just an instruction to go do something. Sell more, increase sales, for instance. That doesn't explain what's driving it, what's behind it, and if we were to use your frame, so what does it mean for where we've been? What does it mean for where we're going? And what does it mean for our people?
And there's also an ability there. So I was recently chief of staff on an exercise, which is the second in charge of it. So all the people, so the exercise play, and then the real world support, the stuff that needs to happen to enable that learning to take place. So that's a busy job. We meet 3 times a day, something called a CAG, a Command Action Group, which crosses both the real world and the exercise world, because safety is an issue. We've got to maintain safety. We're carrying weapon systems that they weren't live in that exercise. It's blank firing. Still risk needs to be understood. And in my reflection, one of the bits that I'm probably most proud of is I put a risk challenge in at every CAG, which was everybody in that room who was a leader. So rank doesn't matter. There was, Air Specialist 1, which is our lowest rank. There was a wing commander in the room, was given an opportunity to look at the 5 biggest risks that we were carrying around the training of everybody and the safety of everybody, and to challenge there and then. And I suppose that's probably a bit of pride that I'm showing there, and a bit of a brag maybe, is we were permission to do things differently. And I know you and I know the late great Chris Monk, who sadly passed away a few years ago, from, values in business was, the ability to do things differently is what I seek in myself and in that command and leadership. And that's the so what. So what are you going to do to make sure that your training plan is delivering for your people that the taxpayer is giving you money to do? Well, do you know what? I'm going to get everybody 1 minute a day, 3 minutes a day, the opportunity. I'm going to give for 3 minutes a day the opportunity for everybody to challenge me about risk management. Not so that we dilute the training, but so that potentially we stretch ourselves further. That's so what for me in action.
So does that mean challenge upwards as well? You're inviting challenge upwards.
Yeah, in line with service discipline. Chain of command's there, we wear ranks, we salute, we do that type of thing. The answers are at the base of the pyramid. Enable people, grow your people to challenge authentically, creatively, and in an understood manner to deliver, and that will come. That's the so what for me.
Do people feel safe enough to do that? Because you at one point, you're saying, you're acknowledging the fact that there is a very strong, clear hierarchy in terms of the command structure, but then, on the other side of the coin, you're then saying that you're actively encouraging, challenge, and often that is upwards challenge. People have to feel psychologically safe to do that. So how do you go about creating the safety or the perception of safety so that people can make that challenge without fear of perhaps them being black marked for their next promotion?
I think the first thing is a objective reporting system. I think the second bit that comes with that is it's incumbent on all of us to set the criteria for the meeting, or for the for the CAG, or for whatever we're in. What are we trying to do here and why? So come back to our first question on that estimate. And then the other bit as well is the highest performing teams agree in public and disagree in private. There's nothing wrong with a bit of passion. There's nothing wrong even with losing your temper. So Alex Ferguson definitely did that and said that. But if you do that in a way that you can evidence is respectful and understood, but you're dealing, everybody's busy. So you're dealing with real busy people. So how you make your point, and I kind of look at that as the golf bag analogy. You're allowed 14 clubs in championship golf when you go out on the Open or the Masters. Maybe my group captain doesn't need Nick and his 3-wood to come and smash him in the face. Perhaps I just need to chip at that. But equally, maybe some of the guys prefer a bit more explicit. So it's incumbent on us, as all of us, to be great coaches, great mentors, and to take people with us. How you make that point is contextually driven in the environment. So pick your moment. That doesn't mean we filter or we fettle upwards. What it means is at the right moment, we all have a responsibility to each other to make sure that our training is quality, assured, and safe.
Yeah, and what I'm picking up from that is that obviously, you might say a high degree of emotional intelligence on the communicator's part, on the leader's part is necessary because, as you say, some groups will want it quite bluntly. Some groups might want it with a little bit more sugar coated around it. And it's about understanding how best to deliver that message and build that respect, because you're 100% right. Massive ingredients of psychological safety is respect. And I'm just going to draw this back to OKRs for a second. When we're helping clients to build up their OKRs, the leaders will define the ones at the top, which are the ones, or perhaps even at the center if you're not using a hierarchy, which shows the direction, the long-term direction. But then the next question should be, right, well, what challenges or opportunities do these then throw down for us to either overcome or seize hold of? And how do we go about either seizing them or solving them? And that is not for leaders to, they might have their ideas about how they could go about that, but it's not really the most effective way of gaining buy-in, of gaining commitment, is not for them to define how to do it. It's about getting those that are at the front, at the bottom of the pyramid, as you said. They're the ones with the answers. They're the ones with the insights. So yeah, we do a lot to encourage that to come forth. But if they don't feel safe, if they've never been asked to do that before, we often see them go, "Hang on a second, what are you asking me? I only work here."
In my world, so the the fable, and I'm deliberate in using that term, Roger, psychological safety. I'll tell you one thing: it's not psychologically safe. So now that I've dealt with that in terms of our core business, which is war fighting, what I'll tell you is I'll tell you when you're going to eat. We'll support you to get home. We've got a fantastic welfare system. So we'll try and create our version of psychological safety. So we're really challenging ourselves at the minute in the service to be more agile, to pick up and go at short notice, because that's what the command plan demands of us. So how do we backfill on that to give our people a relative form of safety and assurance that they know that they can go at a minute's notice? Because what psychological safety should be in our world is, I need to go and do this right now to defend the UK. So if I've not prepared them, so why would I induce any form of stress through poor preparation? So actually, what I need to do is to get them more comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's where we sit at my wing level at this minute. We're an expeditionary logistics wing. We're generally the first in, along with airframe, wherever we go in the world. So turn that on its head. What a fantastic, exciting opportunity. You and I speaking on the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Operation Overlord. Really well planned. Nearly didn't happen because of the weather.
Yeah.
Those fellas had no psychological safety. So let's grab hold of our uncomfortable levels and take charge of. So how do we create, up and down the chain, psychological safety? Deliver on your hierarchy of needs, and then deliver people to know that that's efficient and provides for them. The rest will look after itself.
Yeah, because ultimately you're going to ask them, hopefully not, but you could potentially ask them to go to war, which is probably it probably won't feel like a safe environment to go into. So your point being, if I understand you, is why then create an environment which feels unsafe before that? You want them feeling as confident and as secure as possible going into that when you make perhaps the ultimate ask of them.
You're right, but chaos generates order, so we can't rehearse everything. What we need to do is prepare efficiently and effectively. So you've understood me absolutely right, but what is their responsibility? What capacity can I give back to them? So the capacity I can give back to them is if you go forward, your family are going to be looked after. There's a fantastic welfare system. And that's really short and comes over and can land as blunt. But if we look at our ability for our support to our people differently and challenge it so that we don't overtop up, so the kind of classic pint pot of capacity, why are we overflowing that pint pot? Because sometimes just a pint is just enough in that sense.
Yeah. I just want to, you touched upon a couple of examples, and particularly when you were talking about the example of the CAG. As I understand that the CAG is a feature of when you're out on a practice. Probably not the right term, but yeah. In order to build that growth mindset, you need to be always constantly learning, and there is a large part of learning is learning from things that don't always go to plan. So yeah, all right, you can label those as failures if you wish. We prefer them as learning opportunities, but whatever. But in an organization where literally failure is not an option, how do you go about creating that opportunity for learning? And you mentioned that, agile is a huge goal for the goal. And, true agile is iteration. You try something, see if it works, you test it. If it doesn't work, you then refine and try again. How do you make room for that in an organization that is heavily process driven, has a really strong command and control hierarchy, and like I say, where ultimately failure isn't an option?
So I think the first thing is your quality of training, so your training objectives. The second thing is permission to do something differently. Seek that from above. And then the third thing is have some confidence to try. So the exercise that I just mentioned, where we have that command action group, and that happens on operations, and the battle rhythm will dictate how often and how frequently we move. But when on home plate as well, we'll still have the equivalent of a CAG. That might be squadron execs or wing execs or heads of sheds or whatever that looks like. So we paused an exercise for 9 hours to capture learning. Again, we're proud of that as a team. What's going well? Where do we need to challenge you? Are you being challenged? What's not going so well? How can we potentially accelerate further safely? Can we push this scenario further? So all of those mechanics that, it was a 250 person exercise, and I'll send you the link if you want to show that to, if you want to put that into this or for your own.
That would be fantastic. Yeah.
About what we were doing was we were testing ourselves, but to pause an exercise rather than getting to the end of an exercise 7 days later and saying, it didn't go that well. Well, actually, halfway through a 14-day exercise, turning around and saying, hey, we're going to take pressure off now. You're out of scenario. So what? So what's going well? So what's not going well? So what do you need from us? And so what else can we do to support your learning? Now, we internally validate and externally validate all of our work. So participants and directing staff will have a anonymous validation form that will be sent to them through the laptops, obviously through the IT system that we use. We then collate that and we'll form, a post-exercise report that will come from that and say, here are the biggest things in real world and here are the biggest things in exercise world that prevented challenge and learning. So your lessons identified, that's what that will generate. Obviously, it's the military, so we use lots of acronyms. So it's LIs, those lessons identified, is different from lessons learned. Because lessons learned is different. If we identified the LIs from last year or from when this exercise last run, right. Have we then put that into our design phase as we go forward into that cyclical nature of running that exercise in 2025?
Yeah. Have
we got after that? And have we absolutely nailed that lesson identified? And is it valuable to allow that to occur or not occur again? So that's, for me, that's your gold around that analysis and that process. So it's creating an environment up and down the chain, anonymous feedback, upward feedback, group feedback, all the different ways that you can facilitate learning to cap and then to analyze effectively. And that's what the defense systems approach to training allows us to do.
All right. Okay. So basically, you be on exercise, you'll pause, and it's not quite the same, but we design into the work that we do with clients regular retrospectives. So you don't wait until the end of the year to go, what worked, what didn't work, and what can we learn? Because the immediacy effect means you probably only remember the past 4 or 5 weeks anyway. So, we build that into usually every 3 months, when they come to the point of review and reset. And it's powerful. It's powerful. And in the maelstrom of regular day-to-day activity in all organizations, and I'm sure the RAF is no different, there's 1,000,001 other things to do that could distract you from actually just taking that, that pause to go, what's worked, what hasn't. And I like your distinction between LI and LL, because something isn't necessarily learned until something has actually fundamentally changed. Yes. So lessons identified and lessons learned. I think that's a nice little distinction. Thank you. So, Nick, you've been really generous with what you've shared. And I think just to kind of wrap it all up and put a nice little bow on top, what would be the 3 takeaways that you would give to listeners, from your experience, if they're trying to build an organization, a culture which is really going to underpin OKRs, growth mindset, that sort of thing. What would be the 3 takeaways that you've seen work really well in the RAF setting?
So the first thing is what I've said is to hold that lightly. That's just my experience. Obviously, other aviators, commissioned and non-commissioned in the service, will have different views. So my one person's advice. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Easy sometimes said than done. The second point, as I already, alluded to quite proudly, a member of the first independent air force in the world, innovate. That's what we do. And I believe that's what the Royal Air Force does exceptionally well. So innovate, but test, challenge, adjust, and refine within that innovation bit. You're not going to get to perfect without learning and identifying and cohering and understanding that that's what the bigger requirement, the bigger picture is. Mm-hmm. And then I think the third thing is we talk about being fit to fly and fight, because we need to fight to go and win wars. That's our core business. So spend time holding yourself to account regularly and use evidence, but also trust your gut. If it doesn't look right, guess what? It's probably not right. But why? So be curious, be vulnerable as well as an organisation, and be curious. And those for me are kind of my guiding principles in my craft of being a commissioned officer, and also from a coaching perspective. Those for me, I don't think you're necessarily going to go massively wrong there.
Nice. Okay. I think those are three really, really cracking recommendations for people to take away. Nic, you've been a star. Thank you very much for giving us your time. It's been great having you on Giant Talk, and thanks very much to our listeners. And I look forward to having you join me on another episode very soon. Thanks, Nic.
Thanks, Roger. Cheers.
Cheers.